Foley for this year's Rhoton Family Lecture. Kevin's career spans groundbreaking innovations in spine surgery, leadership in academic medicine, and service as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. With more patents than any neurosurgeon in history and a profound commitment to education, Kevin exemplifies the legacy that is honored by this lecture. His work has transformed how we teach and practice neurosurgery. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Foley to the stage.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to speak to you on this occasion of this lecture series that honors Dr. Al Rhoton and his family. These are my disclosures. Now, we all know Dr. Rhoton had a long and very distinguished neurosurgical career, and of course, one of his pursuits was education, especially neuroanatomic education. And in his travels, he would often come to Memphis and visit us at our anatomic teaching facility, the Medical Education and Research Institute. We have the privilege of housing the physical Rhoton collection in Memphis, although you all know the digital collection is online. And in addition to giving some inspiring and insightful lectures at Mary, Dr. Rhoton would often engage in one of his other favorite pursuits, physical exercise. And so there were some legendary push-up contests that would go on out in front of the Mary. So here is one where a number of the younger faculty are challenging the old master to a push-up contest, and bit by bit, the younger ones drop out. And then finally, even Dr. Van Lovern has to concede defeat. So kudos to Dr. Rhoton for not only a marvelous neurosurgical career, but mastery of the push-up contest. So my topic today is going to be why independent practice is fading, why this matters for patients, and what can still be done to address this situation. And we'll speak about the fact that independent practice is indeed slowly but surely disappearing, and why that's happening, why this matters for patients, and what we can pursue in terms of reforms that might help reverse this situation. Independent practice isn't fading because it's clinically inferior. It's being financially squeezed in a policy-rigged game. And the numbers speak for this. So over the past decade and a half, the number of independent practices have gone from over half to less than half, and the number of independent practices continues to shrink. And in independent practice, you face this economic cliff, the cliff constantly towering and rising as costs of practice increase. And our safety net, our reimbursement, is constantly shrinking such that something has to give, and what gives is physician compensation. And we all know this, we all live this. Here are the economics of reimbursement for spine care just since 2000, and those of you who were around before that in the 80s and 90s know that this trend has been going on for decades. Here specifically, some of the numbers around the declining reimbursement for a common procedure, ACDF, and it extends into our cranial practices, such that if you do a more complex, tougher case with higher risk, your reimbursement per time unit is actually much lower. So while independent practice is often efficient clinically, it's disadvantaged financially before the day even starts. Now contrast that with what the hospital systems have access to, and keep in mind that all of these buckets of money are legislatively derived. So this includes tax advantage and the ability not to pay property taxes and to issue tax-exempt bonds, site of service payment differentials, pots of money in drug pricing, and we'll talk about that in some more detail. Independent practice also faces not just the costs of your people and your supplies, but your healthcare spend for your benefits and your malpractice spend, etc. Again, the disadvantages are legislative in nature. Section 6001 of the Affordable Care Act is a good example of this. Passed in 2010, it outlawed additional physician-owned hospitals, and it capped the existing physician-owned hospital beds at their present number. Now, what was messaged to Congress by the hospitals was that physicians are cherry picking, they're overutilizing, they're driving up costs, when in truth it was exactly the opposite. And think about it, competition typically is good for an economic system. Limiting competition is not good, it drives up prices. So independent groups face these legislatively derived stacked set of headwinds. Site of service differentials, where if you do the same thing in a facility that happens to be physician-owned, you're paid substantially less for the same thing than if the facility is hospital-owned. Declining real reimbursement, we've all felt that. These pots of money, 340B is a good example. This came about in the early 90s, and it was for funding AIDS clinics and rural hospitals. It mandated that covered entities could buy drugs from pharmaceutical companies at pennies, sometimes a penny, and then sell them at retail for hundreds or thousands of dollars. Started out as a small program, but legislative creep, the covered entities expanded. It's expanded to all over the place now, even large hospital systems. Last year alone, $120 billion spent on 340B, more than twice the NIH budget. Physician-owned hospital restriction, we've already talked about this, and of course the administrative scale disadvantage that I just mentioned. And when independent practice shrinks, patients face higher prices, less continuity of care, narrow choices. They can't go see certain physicians or go to certain facilities, RVU pressure, and quality dilution. And affiliation matters to cost. This is from the Avalier report that was published in September of 2024. And Avalier looked at 5 different specialties, that care weighted across 5 specialties for CMS patients. So a year of CMS spend per patient for the same condition. Where that patient received care mattered financially to the system. If that patient was cared for in a physician-run facility versus a corporate or hospital-run facility, the care was much less expensive. Patients pay more simply because their care gets shifted into a different setting that's higher cost. In the macro results, it's visible to every family in the U.S. Growth in their pay for insurance, their healthcare costs, enormous over the past couple of decades, and wages just aren't keeping up. Independent practice matters because it is one of the few remaining structural checks on healthcare price inflation. Well, we're told we can't have greedy physicians owning hospitals and other healthcare facilities, right? We're just going to drive up costs and overutilize. But that's not what the literature shows. If you compare physician-owned facilities to hospital-owned facilities, readmissions are lower, mortality is lower, case mix is similar, patient satisfaction is higher, average cost per discharge is lower, and length of stay is shorter. And physicians often thrive when they're led by fellow physicians. And there are a variety of reasons for this, but one of the major reasons is the alignment of the decision makers and the caregivers. And when the decision maker is a peer, that decision maker bears the same clinical and financial consequences as you do. They're in the same boat. And patients can end up doing worse in facilities that aren't run by physicians. The caregivers are now under RVU pressure, substantial. There's fragmentation of care, distance of decision-making from the bedside. When's the last time you saw an administrator in your OR? And what I call quality theater, where there are quality metrics, but they're crazy metrics that don't really relate to true quality of care. So what needs to change? Awareness is one thing, but it's not nearly enough. And these things are policy-driven, so it's policy that's going to determine whether or not independent practice survives. Here are 5 policy reforms that neurosurgeons can rally around. Site-neutral payment, true inflation updates for reimbursement, repeal or reform of Section 6001, payment reform transparency, and transparency about some of these large buckets of money, and at least tying those advantages to some kind of measurable community benefit. Right now, that doesn't exist. Now, admittedly, our advocacy efforts have too often been incremental while these structural pressures have just accelerated. We need to unify around a short list of structural reforms, and importantly, remember this is political, gang, we need more direct political giving and stronger policy literacy among surgeons and among our leadership. Dutch Rojas posted this on LinkedIn this week, and I picked it up because it's perfectly apropos for my talk. And what he said is true. Doctors don't lose policy fights because they're wrong. They lose because they don't pay. We're outspent massively in Washington. This is political foolishness. Last year, less than 6% of us gave to our PAC. This year, only 11 of us have donated the max. It's only $5,000. And these things are crucial, so come on, gang. What neurosurgeons can do in the next 12 months: support candidates and PACs aligned with site neutrality, payment reform, and Section 6001 reform. I want to give a shout out to Dr. John Cowan, neurosurgeon in Georgia, running for Congress this year. He shares our concerns. Support this fellow. Submit specialty comments to contest CMS rules that further compress our procedural payments. Publicize these things that are going on that hurt patients. Educate our residents and partners on practice economics and advocacy, and build alliances with people who share our same concerns. I'll leave you with 3 take-home messages. Independent practice isn't diminishing because it's clinically worse. It's losing because healthcare policy is handicapping it. This matters for patients. It's bad for patients. And if neurosurgeons want a different future where they maintain control of neurosurgical care, policy advocacy has to become a professional priority. Here are some references for some of the things I've told you today, and I'd like to leave you with some words from the great man this lecture series honors.
Please help preserve independent neurosurgery for the sake of our patients.
Thank you very much.